Well, this is a video on how to use inner child work to release limiting beliefs. And I want to talk to you about one of the most effective tools for resolving limiting beliefs. But first of all, what exactly are limiting beliefs? And how do we get them? And how do we get rid of them? So limiting beliefs are unconscious imperatives that become embedded in our psyche, attached to implicit memories and locked down with unexpressed or unresolved negative emotions, usually grief or sometimes anger, whilst often appearing in adulthood as the secondary emotion of anxiety. So how do we get them? Well, we create our initial belief system as a young child when we are impressionable and have a somewhat immature prefrontal cortex. This means reasoning and logic are unavailable to us. And we also have an inability to understand other people's perspectives at this time. This is the egocentric stage of development for young children, which means we can think that everything happens because of us and experience confusing negative emotions in the absence of the natural, nurturing, loving and caring parents would normally afford us. For example, when our mum has something stressful going on in her life that causes her to lash out, say, instead of thinking mum's just having a bad day, we as children internalise mum's emotional projection and make it our own. We then assume that mum is unhappy with us. This must mean, we think, there's something wrong with me. So from the moment we are born, we are completely dependent on our caregivers for our survival. It's natural for us then to want to please or care for our caregivers and avoid, upsetting our lifeline. We will inherently modify our behaviour in whatever way we can to maintain our peace of mind or even survival. And then we begin to believe we need to be small or quiet or perfect, helpful or even loud, pleasing, aggressive or meek in order to be worthy of love and belonging, regardless of whether this adaptive behaviour is in alignment with our developing authentic self or not. We, as it were, perform for our caregivers in order to receive, or the hope of receiving, the attention, affection and recognition that we deserve and that is missing. These fear-based primitive beliefs and behaviours are always accompanied by a second, somewhat more rationalised decision, such as to be me, that's to say my true authentic self, isn't good enough or worthy enough or important enough to get my needs met. I'm obviously a bad person. What's more, we then gradually become anxious that people will discover this shameful truth about us. And in this process, a self-limiting belief is born and then gets stored in our subconscious mind as a truth. It's stored in the subconscious mind because any negative emotions associated with this belief are too painful to bear. As a young child, and for our protection, we have now pushed our self-limiting beliefs out of awareness. We decide we should go about trying to be what everybody else wants us to be, and therefore betraying our developing authentic self over and over again. So when this happens, we have now broken trust with our most important relationship, the relationship we have with ourselves. Now, when we have this rather dysfunctional relationship with ourselves, this can manifest in later life as depression or anxiety, sensitivities and insecurities. No matter how hard we consciously try to create positivity and abundance in our lives as adults, if our subconscious beliefs aren't in alignment with our conscious desires, we will rarely be able to move ourselves forward to our goals and dreams. Instead, we end up feeling defeated and in that process continue to keep reinforcing our self-limiting beliefs. So how do we get rid of these self-limiting beliefs? Now, this isn't straightforward because our beliefs are buried in the subconscious mind. The subconscious mind is powerful. It doesn't like change and is difficult to access. So our first job is to uncover our limiting beliefs, as we are often completely unaware they even exist. In other words, our limiting beliefs only become available to us as negative or unhelpful behaviours, as well as emotional confusion or emotional dysregulation. In my experience, there are three main ways in which we can access our self-limiting beliefs. Firstly, emotional overreactions, often called triggers, although I call them wound activations, my personal choice. Acknowledged insecurities, often associated with negative thinking and our extreme inner critic. And thirdly, to monitor our judgment of others, which are mostly our own projected insecurities, often called simply that, projections. So let's start with emotional overreactions, triggered by a present-day event indicating that an old emotional wound has become activated. The overreaction is because the current day event bumped up against an old wound, and so you are reacting to the pain of that old wound and not just the pain of the current day event. This can, of course, be painful, but therapists think of these events as a gift, an opportunity to get in touch with and heal an old emotional wound, to reanalyze an old limiting belief, as well as release any accompanying negative emotions, often anger or grief. Now, the method I use to heal these old wounds is called inner child work. There are other practical methods, for example, creating a real-time small goal that challenges your inner child belief. This is useful, but because I believe that psychic change can only manifest permanently when manifested in relationship. The best relationship to work through self-limiting beliefs is at the age they were created and in relationship to yourself at that time. In other words, with your inner child. Let's look at the stages of inner child work. Now, stage one is when you have, for example, that emotional reaction. We invite you to sit in your emotions. Be present also not only with the emotion, but with any physical sensations of your emotion. You can even do this retrospectively by just closing your eyes and recalling the incident that led to the overreaction, which will revisit those negative emotions. So when sitting in the emotion itself, ask yourself, how old do I feel right now? And just go with the age that comes to mind and ask yourself, what was going on at that age that is reminiscent of this emotion? And what was the story or meaning you gave to this event? I mean, what did this event mean to you? Having analysed that, then in stage 2, still with your eyes closed, ask yourself, what did your younger self need to hear at this time? Then follow this by asking yourself, what does your younger self need to hear right now in order to change his or her narrative or story? Something like, it's not your fault. There is nothing wrong with you. I am here with you. You are not alone. I love you, and I'm so sorry. Remember, nothing in your childhood was your fault or your responsibility. But now you're an adult, it is your responsibility to actively participate in your own healing. You are no longer back in that hurtful time. You are here in the present moment, right now. This is a time when you can begin processing your emotions and changing your narrative to move forward with freedom and choose more aligned responses and behaviour. Now the next stage, stage 3, I ask you to again close your eyes and bring an image to mind of yourself at this age that relates to this emotional overreaction. Imagine your innocent, curious, loving, joyful, creative, adorable younger self sitting right next to you. Then open your heart space and embrace your younger self with all the love you can. Tell your younger self all the things they needed to hear at that time and tell them the truth. Indeed, it's okay to hold and rock your younger self whilst telling yourself what you needed to hear. And the final stage, when you're finished, stage 4 that is, when you're finished speaking lovingly to your younger self. In stage 4, we invite your younger inner child to come home with you. When your young self created that limiting belief, you were quite likely most ashamed of yourself and your incorrect assumption that there was something wrong with you. When we feel ashamed of ourselves, we often exile that part of ourselves. This is why it's important to bring your inner child back home to yourself. You can say things like, you are safe with me. I love you. I will never leave you again. You don't need to worry anymore. Perhaps even forgive me for abandoning you. In this process, you are bringing the energy of your inner child into your adult self. Now take a deep breath and open your eyes. So that's an example of inner child work. And if you'd like any help with this, please get in touch. Visit my website, stephenelliker.coach, and book a free discovery call. And let's see what's possible.